Alright guys, today we are looking at the LEQ, the long essay question. So the LEQ is 15% of your grade on the exam. It is 40 minutes, so it's the shortest amount. It's a shorter amount of time, so you do have to be mindful of your time. It is out of 6 points. Essentially what they're going to do is they're going to give you 3 questions, alright? Each one from a different time frame. And then you pick one. You only have to do one of them. So whichever one you feel like you're strongest in, whichever one you feel like you know the most about, pick that one. The one thing to note too is they all deal with the same historical thinking skill. So all 3 questions will be the same historical thinking skill. So it's really important that you actually identify what they're asking. Now, sometimes, like we've seen, they ask questions that are open to multiple historical thinking skills, and that's fine, right? But just realize like it's going to be the same throughout all 3. And I've said it once, I'm going to say it again, use the actual words in your essay, right? When you're dealing with historical thinking skills, I'm going to touch on it again, but use the words. If it's compare and contrast, say this compares with, right? So what you're going to do when you first get the essay, you're going to read the prompts, identify the time frames, identify the historical thinking skills, and then you're going to start writing the essay. I'm going to take a look at what that's going to look like here in just a second. On a side note, right, as usual, don't ever use first person, right? I, we, don't say things and stuff, right? Like don't do things that sound dumb. Only include relevant information as well. So as you're writing this essay, you're gonna be tempted to throw in tons of facts. If they're not relevant, don't include them. Do include tons of facts if they are relevant though. All right. So before we dive into the body, I wanna look at the thesis again because it's really important for the LEQ. As we talked about before in the previous video, although X, A and B, therefore Y, right? So X being a counter-argument, A and B being specific evidences, right? Your lines of reasoning, and then Y being your argument, essentially your answer to the prompt. And as I said before, like therefore kind of forces you to answer the prompt. One thing I do want to point out here is make A your strongest argument. Whatever you feel like you're going to be strongest in, make that to be A. And I'll get to that in a second, a reason why. So, remember, although X, A, and B, therefore Y. So, introduction, right? When you're writing the LEQ, here's the format you're going to take. Right? You're going to have your introduction, then you're going to have your contextualization, 2 to 3 sentences. Again, it's your opening, if you guys remember, like previously on. That's what your contextualization is. Then you're going to have your thesis, which is 1 to 2 sentences. Now, body paragraph 1 is AX. Right? And so your answer, right, based off of A, right? According to evidence A, this is my answer X. And that is going to be your body paragraph 1, all right? And the reason being is, again, like make this your strongest argument. The reason you're going to do that is right off the bat, you want the reader to have a good first impression, right? They're going to give you a little bit more grace later on if you can really show you know what you're talking about right off the bat. So whatever's your strongest thing, do that first. Right? So you're going to have your topic sentence, tie it to your thesis, the AX, then your supporting evidence, and then connections to your thesis at the end again. We're going to pull it back. Now, analysis, and I'm going to talk about evidence and analysis. Analysis needs to be throughout the whole thing. Throughout the whole thing, you're going to be referring to your historical thinking skills. So make sure you do have that included in each of these. So then, after body paragraph 1, you're going to hit body paragraph 2, which is BX, and then body paragraph 3, which is Y, right? And that is your counter argument. You are going to have to provide evidence to support your counter argument. You're going to do the same thing with these 3, providing both sides, and that's going to help add complexity too, right? You're going to, if you're able to show both sides of the historical thinking skill, it's going to add complexity. Another thing you want to do is, like I said, during your analysis throughout, is throwing in as many historical thinking skills as you can fit in. Then, in your conclusion, you're going to reword your thesis. And here's the logic behind that. By the end of what you're writing, you're going to know what you're trying to say even better than when you started. So in case you weren't very strong in the beginning, the ending will be strong. Give a brief summary of your essay. It's another opportunity to provide historical thinking skills and develop complexity. Like that's kind of another window where you can try to support complexity a little bit, and we'll look at that too in a minute. All right, so let's look at evidence. To get 1 point in evidence, provide specific examples of evidence relevant to the topic of the prompt. All right, specific examples, specific being key there, and then relevant to the topic, all right? That's gonna get you 1 point. Also the fact that it says examples, plural, right? Examples, plural, you need at least 2 examples, right? And if you're following that thesis model I gave you, then you should be fine in making sure you've got your 2 examples in there. Second point, supports an argument in response to the prompt using specific and relevant examples of evidence. So you actually have to support an argument to get that extra point. Some key notes on this, right? When we talk about supports an argument, what you're really trying to do is answer the questions how and why, right? Answer the questions how and why in your prompt. 2, be specific and relevant. I cannot emphasize this enough, guys, with being specific. I know I've said it before. And then being relevant, make sure it actually has something to do with the prompt. Don't just throw random stuff out there so you think it sounds smart. It must be different from contextualization. So don't just reword the things that you've already included. And then also use historical thinking skills language, right? If it's cause and effect, this causes this and impacted it this way. If it's compare and contrast, one comparison is this, one difference is this, right? I know it may feel like you're dumbing down your essay, but you're not. You're making it easier for the grader to find out and figure out what you're trying to say. And then don't go outside of your thesis, right? You do not need to pull things in that aren't part of your thesis because they're going to look at them like this isn't relevant. Right? Again, it's not relevant. So stay within your thesis. All right, on the next slide here, I've given you 5 different examples of evidence. Right, so here's our prompt. It's one that we've looked at on other videos. Evaluate the extent to which the ideas of self-government influenced colonial reaction to British imperial authority in the period from 1754 to 1776. All right, I want you to pause here in a second. And here's a thesis I did tie in, but these examples aren't necessarily directly related to this particular thesis. But these are all examples of evidence that people have given in the past. And I want you to pause it, write down 1 through 5, and then grade each one. Give them 0 points if it's not relevant and not specific. 1 point if it's relevant evidence, and 2 points if it's evidence that's relevant and supports an argument with examples. All right, and so grade all 5 of these, and then hit play. All right, come back when you're ready. Pause. Okay, welcome back. All right, let's look at these different examples. All right, so example 1 was 1 point. 1 point, it got 1 point for evidence, so it does provide actual evidence, but it does not earn the 2nd point because it does not clearly connect the evidence to an argument about self-government, right? So we have some good points there, but does not connect to the arguments about self-government. Example 2. Example 2 gets 0 points. It's too vague, too broad. There's nothing specific here. What massive tax? What smallest things? What are they really trying to say here? Example 3. All right. So during the 1754s to 1776, America's been left on its own to self-govern themselves and was given opportunities to establish its own government. So it's 1, 2, or 3, or 0, 1, or 2 points is actually 0 points. So what they're really talking about here is salutary neglect had been left on its own to self-govern themselves, and so they actually had the time frame mixed up. So they wrong time frame, not the right topic, so they got 0 points for incorrect information. Example 4, this is it right here. This is the 2-pointer. The Stamp Act was the first direct tax on the colonists that they really noticed, all right? So right here we have our evidence. Then the colonists responded to this with the proclamation of no taxation, the argument that they could not be taxed if they weren't represented in Parliament. And so they're supporting an argument with an example, right? So we have our relevant evidence, and then we have our support of our argument. Okay, so number 5, the Boston Tea Party. Was number 5 0, 1, or 2? This one is only 1 point, all right? And the reason being, we do mention the Boston Tea Party, but they don't tie it back to the prompt, right? It's just some facts about the Boston Tea Party. They don't necessarily talk about the ideas of self-government influencing American colonial and British authority, right? They don't tie it back to that. And so those are 5 examples of various ways evidence could go. All right, now let's look at analysis. Okay, so analysis and reasoning. We're looking at historical thinking skills and that elusive complexity point. That's really what analysis and reasoning is. So for 1 point, use historical reasoning, example, comparison, causation, continuity, and change to frame or structure an argument that addresses the prompt, all right? And then 2 points, demonstrates a complex understanding of the historical development that is the focus of the prompt, using evidence to corroborate, qualify, or modify an argument. You can read through all of these different things here. It's also in the CED to figure out what kind of things will actually help your complexity. The analysis portion needs to be throughout, right? As you're providing evidence, you need to actually be using your historical thinking skills in that. So one way to get complexity is do the opposite, right? If we go back to paragraph 1 is AX, BX, and then Y, right? We're trying to get that opposite historical thinking skill. So have cause and effect, change and continuity, comparisons and differences. Another way to do it is synthesize across time periods. That's a harder way to do it, but what you because essentially what you have to say is if A and B is my argument here, then in this time period A and B also occurred, right? And so you have to have the whole thing needs to happen, but that is one way to do it. Remember the 2-to-1 ratio, right? Whatever you do, right, do it with 2-to-1. If you have effects, 2 effects and a cause, 2 causes and effect, 2 changes and a continuity, 2 continuities and a change. That will help build complexity as well. Frame or structure an argument, right? When we're looking at that, let's see, to frame or structure an argument that addresses the prompt. That's really key, that you're actually using that kind of throughout to frame your essay, right? It's all kind of under the historical thinking skills. And again, I want to re-emphasize, use the words, right? Use the historical thinking skills words in your essay. Use them. All right, so now we're going to look at 3 more examples. Okay, I want you to go ahead and we're going to pause it here, and I want you to determine, does it get 1 point, 2 points, or 0 points? Does it get your analysis point? Does it get its reasoning and reasoning point? We get the complexity and the historical thinking skill where we have 0 points. All right, go ahead and pause it now. Okay, welcome back, guys. All right, let's look at these examples. So example 1 gets 0 points. All right, while the response attempts to demonstrate causation and change over time, it actually lacks a structure to an argument that addresses the prompt. It just never gets there, and also it's just poorly written. Americans might have been the British if we hadn't wanted self-government so badly. Luckily, the Brits made it clear by demanding their money that they chose to spend. I mean, we have things he's using like first person, like our, and we might have. And so a reader's going to see that and they're going to be like, what the heck? They're going to be extra hard on it if they're using the first person and such. Example 2, the reactions of the colonists, I don't need to read all, but example 2 actually gets 0 points as well. And because it is factually wrong, right? It comes out and just says, never rooted out the ideals of self-government. There was lots of examples of self-government and ideals. So they argued with the question. And that's a tip on the AP exam. Don't call the test wrong. Don't call the question wrong, right? Like, answer the question or you'll lose that point. And so then we have number 3, and this one actually gets 2 points because we have multiple historical thinking skills in it. It identifies the reasons why the Resistance to Navigation Act was limited in comparison to later taxes such as Stamp Act. So we're being specific, Navigation Act, Stamp Act. We also have that it's comparing and also over time, right? It's looking at over time, so we have continuity and change over time. So we have multiple historical thinking skills all in support of their original argument. All right, folks, there you have it. Those are the elements of the LEQ. Good luck. At this point, now what you need to do is practice, practice, practice. All right, I'll see you guys later.